Independent MP Craig Ingram is one of those who has yet to be convinced about the effectiveness of this inquiry. The Gippsland East member has been calling for an inquiry since the fires broke out in January. But he says this investigation is far short of what is needed. I spoke to him earlier.
We'll have to see the terms of reference, and we've really got to make sure that it is totally independent of government and really has the power to basically stare down the bureaucrats who have making the decision and really ask them the tough questions under oath, because that's the essential thing. So we've really got to see the terms of reference, what the powers are, and more importantly, we've got to get the responsibility to where it really lies. And I think most of the anger is really about the historical management of the forests, where the fuel reduction been. Why have we only met, for example, 50% of the targets over the last decade? And it's not because we've had extremely dry years. For 10 years, we haven't met 50% of the targets, and the worst performance is in the Zone 1 areas. And those questions need to be asked, and you're already starting to see the bureaucrats ducking for cover on this and trying to defend themselves, and that's because I think governments are afraid of litigation. So we've really got to make sure that the questions are answered, and they're answered in a way that the community is satisfied with that response.
The opposition saying it's a whitewash, that it's a public servant investigating the public servants. Is Bruce Esplin, the Emergency Services Commissioner, the right man for the job?
I don't think someone within the government is suitable to do this task. I think it really, if it was going to be independent, it needs to be totally independent, and that needed to be some, I think a retired judge or a judge maybe, that was the best way to go about it. If it wasn't going to be removed from government or parliament, it should have been a parliamentary inquiry. I think, yes, I think he's probably the right person to look at maybe the emergency responses, but we're not talking about that here. We're talking about a broader issue and what caused it and how we're going to fix it. And, there's been a large number of inquiries before. Most of them have come up with certain recommendations, and they've never been kept.
The Commissioner says he'll be taking public submissions, but he hasn't yet decided whether he'll hold public meetings for the people who want to make submissions to his inquiry. Should he be meeting with them?
The Commissioner has to come to places like Walgoomering and Black Mountain and have a look. He needs to do it fairly soon. But I also think, even if that's the way the government wants to go, then they still need to get as many of their MPs and decision makers up to those areas as possible, because until you get not only the current ministers but any future ministers from both sides of politics up to these areas talking to the people, then I don't think you're really going to get to the bottom of it, because, like I said, the bureaucracy is already starting to defend their position.
The Premier said at the press conference that the fuel reduction that was done prior to the fires was as much as conditions allowed. So in announcing the inquiry, he's already saying that the fuel reduction was adequate.
Well, I think the submissions from places like East Gippsland and more than likely the Northeast will be very clear that the fire management has caused the intensity of these fires to be worse than they should have been. And there's some really clear examples. You go up to, like say, Black Mountain, where there are recent fuel reduction burns that have been right in the firing line of the major intensity of the fires, and we've still got green leaves on trees. Yet all around it's a holocaust where there's hardly a leaf on a tree and not a living thing for 20 k's.
We don't know what the terms of reference are, nor do we know who the two independent experts are going to be. Is that good enough?
No, look, I don't think it is. I think they should have really come out with the terms of reference. I rang up the Premier's office today asking for copies of the terms of reference, and we haven't seen them. And I think surely we know by now what needs to be investigated. And I think they really owe it to the people who have been impacted most by this, to come out with the terms of reference, to show them what we are going to be talking about. Because look, in the end, the inquiry is only as good as the terms of reference. It's only as good as the powers that are given and the submissions that they get.
What sort of recovery effort is the community there facing?
They're looking at an enormous recovery task, and they're looking at replacing 3,000 kilometres of fences. There's serious financial hardship on those people. And look, I don't think governments or the bureaucracies really still understand the seriousness of it and the full impact that this is going to have on maybe a small number of farmers, but on the viability of their business. They had good, strong, viable businesses beforehand. When you've got to look at individual farmers that are going to be up for hundreds of thousands of dollars in fences and probably hundreds of thousands of dollars as well just to keep stock alive, on top of obviously an end of a pretty tough period, those farms are going to be put to the wall for something that really they had no control over. Worse than that, they're actually having that threat imposed on them by in my view, poor management of natural resources by a series of governments.
Craig Ingram, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure.